Welcome to our Friday seminar once again. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are grateful that the Lord has given us the privilege of meeting together. And this is a little different from what we normally would do on Sunday, where we have a Bible study and a question and answer period. Here we are exploring the various themes on an emotional level. And we want people to feel that this is a judgment-free space. We want people to feel comfortable with whatever they decide to share, knowing that this is going out over the internet. And we want to be able to listen to each other and share what God has done in our own lives. And today, I thought we would choose a topic that actually came from one of our listeners on our question and answer program. Her name is Mandy, and she had written something that I felt was very powerful. She was speaking about drawing close to the Lord through suffering. And I thought about that, and I'd like to examine that more fully today as a topic. And I'll start just by sharing my own experience. And this had to do with our son who died in 2012. And at the time, this was very unexpected. It was a suicide. And so, of course, we are a large family and very closely knit. And so it was really a shock because my wife and I felt that our son, who had strayed from the Bible for years and years, really, we felt God had done a work of grace in his life. And so it was a tremendous shock for us. At the time, we had spoken to Mr. Camping because he worked at Family Radio, and Mr. Camping had said something that has resonated with us over the years. And he said, I think based on his own life experiences, because his firstborn daughter died, and she died of cancer, and they did not expect that either. And so he told us, don't take your son's death to death, but take it to life. At the time, we weren't sure how to do that or even what that meant. You have a sudden death, and the first thing you feel is tremendous numbness. Then there are various stages you go through, guilt being one of them. Our whole family felt extremely guilty because we felt, if we had only done this or if we had only done that, and it was my fault because of what I said, and so you start blaming yourself. And then, of course, there is resignation, and eventually there's acceptance. But one thing that helped us was the fact that in our office, he had a desk, and above the desk was the Hebrew alphabet. And because he was trying to learn Hebrew, and we really didn't know that at the time, we didn't really think about that much. But in looking back, we sensed that that was something that he wanted to do. And what that did was to make a connection. Even though he was gone, there was a connection there with the Hebrew alphabet. And we had not really paid any attention to Hebrew or Greek at that point. um, other than Bible study. And of course, because we've always been interested in the biblical languages. But this was something a little different. And so we began trying to learn the Hebrew alphabet. And it was daunting at the time because it's foreign. And with something that you're not used to or something that's foreign, there's always a learning curve for sure, but there's also the idea that can I even do this? And yet we started, and that led to not just the alphabet, but it led to the points and these little tiny dots and dashes underneath the letters, and also above the letters as well. And we learned that these were grammatical and musical symbols. What we didn't realize was that each of those elements have great spiritual significance, and they're actually words found in the Bible, and they have deep spiritual meaning. And so what we began seeing very slowly, this now is going over a number of years, we realized that this was something that we wanted to investigate even more so. And it captured our attention. And we, in the process, God was taking our minds off of our son's death and putting it elsewhere, putting it on him, really, through all of these elements in the scriptures. And as we realized what we were extracting from the scriptures, that brought a measure of hope and comfort and peace. And of course, this is what the scriptures do. The comfort and patience of the scriptures, we recognize, is what gives us hope and enables us to carry on day to day. And so this was like a beautiful flower opening up in terms of our understanding of how these elements all pointed to Christ and to his church, because that's really the grand theme of all scripture. The pain never goes away. The pain is always there, but it can be mitigated, number one, especially if you sense, or we sensed at the time, that our son was with the Lord. And so that helped a lot. But also by focusing on scripture and on these elements, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if we would have gone this route if God had not taken our son. We might have, but nonetheless, God used this in our lives to go this way. And in doing so, this has, lifted that burden of numbness, of blame, of not really knowing what to do. At the time, we had 5 younger children, and we decided we're going to take them to California because we didn't want them in that environment where the death had happened, and sort of like getting a new start. Now, that's always not the best thing to do, to make rash decisions like that, when somebody dies. It's better to wait. However, be that as it may, that's what we did. And that brought us back to California because we're both from California. And then everything kind of went from there. and we started all over again, you could say. The older kids stayed behind in Ohio, which is where we had raised our family for the past, prior to this, the past 20 years or so. Well, we feel like, in a way, we were sort of like the two men on the road to Emmaus, where there was tremendous sorrow initially. But then Jesus joined them, even though he hid himself from them. They didn't understand it was him. But yet, as they walked along, he chided them. He also shared the scriptures pointing to him. And so by the time they got to Emmaus, they had listened to probably, one of the most magnificent Bible studies ever spoken, but yet not recorded as an entire entity, even though we know he went through all the Old Testament scriptures speaking about himself. So in a way, it is recorded. Nonetheless, when they got to Emmaus, he opened their eyes and they were able to see him in the breaking of the bread. Well, for us, this has been transformative, and it has helped us on our journey to be able to take his life, take his death to life. We didn't know this at the time. We didn't know how it was going to take shape, but this is the shape that it took. And so this is what I'd like to focus on today, as far as your individual journey through suffering and how God has used that to bring you closer to the Lord and to actually, and they're like parallel tracks. There's suffering that God causes to go through, but then at the same time, there's his presence that sustains us through that journey. It's sort of like, I like to think of Paul when he asked the Lord to take away the thorn in the flesh. And from what I understand, the thorn in the flesh are the Judaizers. And they were a real problem for Paul, so much so that he asked the Lord 3 times, "Can you take this away from me?" And the Lord responded by saying, "No, my grace is sufficient for you." And Paul was content with that. And not just content, but he was willing to glory, as he puts it, in his weakness, in his infirmities. And so I think that's what I'd like to explore. If anybody, if either of you would like to share your own personal experience along these lines, or anyone that's listening by text, feel free to write whatever you might be going through. We want to hear from you as well. And sometimes it's easier to write something than it is to speak, because these are vulnerable issues that we go through. And yet we want it to be open to anybody. Yes, Mark, go right ahead.
I don't know. It never goes away. It takes a different shape. And from one shape to the next, on mine, Gunther, my wife passed away in 2005. I did everything I could because I thought you're supposed to hold on, grab tighter, pull everything together, pull the family together, pull everybody together, hang on as tight as you can. And down the line, you go, you're strong, you're weak, and for me, I don't understand why it took so many years. It didn't just take a few years. I'm saying even up till today, I think I'm even opening up to it now, because then I got remarried in 2016. I was going to do it right this time. Wasn't going to let nothing happen. This one was going to be perfect. And then it happened again, 2018. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm grabbing tight. I'm grabbing the family. I'm grabbing everything as tight as I can, thinking it's the right thing to do. And all along, as it's changing shapes, I'm just looking for a new way to hold it together. I'm trying to be strong. I don't want nobody to see me weak. I'm the guy that's going to hold everything together. And again, took another. They just take different shapes, and a lot of different shapes. You know, once you're strong, and then you're not strong, and then you're trying to figure out. I guess what, for me, because it led to a lot of other things with family issues with my own children. You know, the more I tried to keep things together, the more I pushed people away. And I'm thinking now for the first time, and I haven't seen this yet, and I'm convinced that for me, it's bringing me closer to surrender. I spent my whole life trying to be righteous, honest, raise my family. When I was 12 years old, I couldn't wait to raise a family. That's all I wanted to do was have a job, have kids, have a family, get on track. And the tighter I grabbed, the tighter I grabbed, it just kept going away. And I kept thinking I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong. That's why this is happening. Not realizing I'm nowhere near to surrendering. I'm just grabbing tighter and tighter. I spent 40 years pushing harder and harder against the tide. 40 years. I'm not kidding. Now I sit here. I have 4 kids and 13 grandkids and 2 great grandkids. Well, half of my grandkids I've never met before because I don't talk to my kids. I'm sitting at this point still trying to figure out how did I miss it so bad? How I can't even begin to look back now, just understanding. And once you get to the point of surrender, now the work begins. Now, that's all I've got is surrender. All I can say is I've never been this close. Never. I've never even contemplating on thinking it was about surrender. And I don't mean surrender like give up. What I mean is surrender my whole outlook on everything. And I lived it that way. With my family, I was strict with my kids. I expected a certain way, and then when they seen me become human, when I had my bouts, that shocked them. And now then I became a hypocrite. And then I fought harder. So it's not just one thing. It was a series of things that morphed into different things that led me here. All I can say is I've never been here before. So I this, I do have more assurance that I ever had as far as my relationship with God. I was trying to please him. And so here's where I'm at now, you know. So I'm 3,000 miles away from everybody I know, everybody I've ever known, by myself. And
So if I'm understanding you correctly, at each point you tried to hold things together for the sake of the family, your first wife, the second wife, and when you made a statement about wanting to be strong, did you show your vulnerable side? Did you at any point show your children, your grandchildren, that you didn't have the answers and that you were actually weak, not as a negative, but just as a reality for them to see that vulnerability?
see, they seen it, Gunther. See, I had an HVAC business for 30 years too. There was a lot of things to hold on to. You know, my business, but I drank at certain times, and they seen it, and it was ugly, and it was judgmental, but nonetheless, that's what they take from it. That's what they take from it. I can't undo it. But that's where that came from. That's where that came from. I went out and did things. You know, that's what I did. I was good, I was bad, I was good, I was bad, all the while I'm thinking I'm still okay because everybody's still got a roof over their head. We're heading in that direction. What I didn't see was what everybody else was seeing. That's what, how they were internalizing it. I guess I knew I was being watched. At all times, I knew I was being watched. And I don't know. That's what they see, Gunther. That's what they see.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because it's so easy for us. I'm just speaking for myself, because I know that I had terrible issues with anger myself, and my kids saw that, and it's something that, of course, I'm not proud of. And we all have our own struggles, and our children see that. And it's not do what I say. The way they look at it is, I'm going to do what you do. Okay, because that speaks louder than anything, is what we actually do. Of course, our words are very important too, because our words can be instruments. Our words can be weapons. We can weaponize our speech. It's not just weaponizing our actions, but our speech. We can weaponize our speech. And kids are extremely perceptive. They pick it up. And this is something that I think every parent needs to be aware of, okay, because it's real. You can fool yourself. You might be able to fool others. Obviously, we can't fool God. But others, how we don't, a lot of times we don't, I know for myself, we don't see ourselves the way others see us. And it's difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but I think it's very important to do that. Now that's easier said than done. And I know that having to, making oneself vulnerable, showing weakness, I think it's just a matter of being honest with everybody, because that speaks louder than anything, because people see through whatever facade we might want to put up. I'm not saying that yours is a facade at all. I'm just saying, I know for myself, it always, when I could be honest with them, I think it went better by because people can see if you're genuine, and if not, then they have a tendency to look at you as a hypocrite, and that's just a fact. But I really appreciate you sharing that.
Well, for me, Gunther, it was a facade. Now I look back, it was a facade, because I was trying, in my mind, thought I was, I grew up similar. My dad had a business, same thing, same construction business since the 60s, okay? He had three divorces. He had a pretty rough life, and he drank, and he did, but I never thought to judge him not one time. I didn't interpret that to mean he don't love me or anything. To me, that was he's going. He's finding his way. I thought I was being that. That's what I thought. I had no idea I was going to get met. You see a sign of the times. We are surely in a sign times of more judgment, to where your life is on display, and and it gets shouted from the rooftop. But it didn't used to be like that, but it was a facade. It was a facade. It was definitely a facade. I had a warped sense of why I was doing what I was doing, and why it was okay, I guess. But all along, it was to show me. It was to show me pride. There was just nothing but pride, just thinking I can do everything. I can do this. My dad was, he stood on a mountaintop to me, because he fell so many times, but he got up so many times, and I admired that. I thought I thought that was something to, I don't take it lightly. You know what I mean? I don't mean to laugh at it, but yeah, that some people need a tap on the shoulder, to get their attention. I need a 2x4 hit me in the back of the head. That's what I need to keep beating me down, because I'm not that guy. Just well, by God's grace, though, I do. Like I said, though, I've never been here before. With as far as I've gone, with as much that I've lost, I've never been here, and it feels different. It feels a lot different. I don't have regrets. I don't have sorrow. I don't have that. I just have him. That's it, and that is it. I don't have anything else. Anything.
In what way does it feel different?
Like there was a purpose. Like there was a meaning for. Now it all has a meaning that I never seen before. Okay, although it was horrible, there was there's it's almost like an explanation. I never could find a purpose. What is all this for? Why does it keep happening? And if the purpose was surrender, and like I said, and I'm finding out too, surrender isn't just as easy just to put your hands up and say, okay, God, it's all yours. Man, the heavy work starts now, surrender, because I got to catch myself. Everything I think now, everything that I think before it comes out of my mouth, I got to think now, which I never did before. Okay? So I don't want to say I feel at peace, because I wobble. I wobble because I still have to find myself. Am I surrendering right? I'm still battling with that. Am I surrendering right? Of all things, okay, like I said, I need a 2x4 to hit me in the head. They can't tap me on the shoulder. But it's not going away this time. It's still, the work is still being, now the work is still, it's constant.
So how does the work manifest itself, in which ways, knowing that you've come to a point where you realize, okay, I need to surrender, everything to the Lord, going forward. How does that manifest itself, let's say, on a day-to-day basis? If you can talk a little bit more about that, and how you've been helped by doing certain things in this new way.
Guilt, shame, and anger are my biggest. They're my biggest foes, but I can battle those now with promises that I've never been able to battle that with, and now I can do it with scripture. I can use promises so I got to catch myself. Okay, you're right there. Okay, back out of that, put that in where it goes. Okay, because and a lot of that's vanity. My guilt is from what I think people perceive me as. Okay, that's about as vain as you can get. But
can you kind of elaborate on that? That your guilt stems from how people perceive you?
Well, in what way to elaborate? I mean, because that's a mouthful for me right there. Because
how do you think they're perceiving you? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. And how can you counteract that? Because I realize a lot of that has to do with the past, but going forward, how has it helped you to counteract that?
I don't think I can counteract it. All I can do now is go forward with a new look at it. Okay, I don't look at it. It's not like I'm going to pick myself up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that now. Now I look for everything I can drop. I can, I can't go back and undo.
Sure.
But the guilt, just because I know people in their minds were let down. They were let down. And I know it's pure judgment. It was pure judgment. It was let down with what I built myself up to be, and what they seen and how they perceived it. It and I'm sorry for that. But I can't fix that. Because what they know is stubborn, hard head, control. You got to fix everything. That's what they know. And all my life, everybody, most of my family was, even my brother, most of the people I know, they all say, "What's wrong with you? You love too hard. Why do you love so hard like that?" That's what it is to me. It's. I guess if it's shown in control, I guess you can call it control. If I want to fix something, I never perceived it like that, but that's how they seen it. That's what their picture is. Got to control everything. He pushes everybody away. He doesn't let anybody do anything. So that's, and I can't talk my way back into a conversation for people to understand, because all I can see this, if 60 years of my life, that's what you've seen, I haven't got no words to, if that's what you've seen, that's what you've seen. So, as far as repairing things, I got my hands full repairing myself. I got my hands full. That's enough for me right now. I guess, like I said, these things, they change shapes. Grief changes shape. It don't go away. It just changes shape into something else. And maybe there'll be a point or not. I don't know. See, now I know when I try to think ahead, like, okay, how can it be? I know I'm in trouble again already. I'm already in trouble because here I am trying to see how the future's going to be. The hardest thing about surrender is living in the moment. I've never lived in the moment. I've always been behind, learn from my mistakes, proceed it forward. I've never lived in the moment. And so once I even get my mind into that arena, I got to shut it down. Because today has its hands full already. And going through it's like, it feels like the battle with that is hour by hour by hour every day. That I'd never known before. So that's where I'm at. And I can just say I like it better, I guess. I'm
Why
glad
do you say that?
Huh?
Why do you say that you like this better?
Because it feels like I can get better. It feels like I can heal. It feels like I don't have to carry this no more. I don't have to do all this. And I never did have to. And I've been dragging this I've been dragging this rock for so long. That's why. I don't mean like I feel good,
I
I'm just
understand.
saying I like it better because, like I said, there's now, if the purpose was for this, I'm just so sorry. I know God's timing is perfect, but boy, I don't understand what took me 60 years. I don't understand why it took. I think I could accomplish, but I'm here, and that 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 to me, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, and I'm glad to say I don't know. Usually, I'd always have an answer. I'd always have an answer, or something what I was gonna do, or something how the future's gonna look, and I plan on doing this and plan on doing that.
Is
Living
there
in the
a
moment.
Yeah, excuse me. Is there a correlation when you said that grief changes shapes? How did that relate to the guilt, the shame, and the anger? Or was that something different?
No, there was a lot of anger, a lot of feeling sorry for myself. Uh, So, there's times when I thought I had it under control. Okay, like I said, when my first wife that died, she was in an automobile accident, and it was instantly right on the highway. My daughter was in a coma. My son, they were with them. Okay, I had a nephew and both my kids. They each got shipped to different hospitals because my daughter was a trauma victim, so they took her to a trauma center. My son had seatbelt injuries, so they took him to a children's hospital. You're familiar with California, one's in Madera, and one was in Sacramento, UC Davis. Okay, so and I'm right in the middle of running a business. So come to find out, I'm trying. These kids are separated now. One got flown off with a helicopter on a meta flight. 8 years old. He thought he just lost his mom and his sister. They're both gone. He knew his mom was dead. I have to get to him. My focus is on him. At the same time, but I got, a lot of. I had a lot of things to try to pull together. So when I would feel like I'm okay, I'm doing this right, I'm being strong, I got this together, and it would go so long, and then it would fall apart. Okay, then the highs and the lows, and what am I going to do? There was never no rest. It was constant for no rest. Okay, then come to find out, my son's seatbelt injuries were just as serious because he was growing. His insides tore apart. Okay, they tore apart, and they were building up fluids in him. He was an hour away from dying before we got him from Madera to Sacramento, because there was an insurance reason for the ambulance ride why they wouldn't take him over there, and they wouldn't release him. My mom's at the hospital. I'm in Sacramento. She's freaking out. Get this kid out of here. So we pay cash just to get him out of there. As soon as he got to UC Davis, within an hour, he was under the knife and they cut him open. So I asked afterwards. I said, why the difference in the hospitals? And they said, we're UC Davis. This is a trauma center. When we see a problem, we don't wait. We go. We're going to go inside and we're going to look. If you got a scar when you're done, that's fine, but you're going to be okay. But he said, if it would have been an hour later. Okay, so there's all that stuff going on, and I haven't grieved my wife yet. Now she's still on the highway, with all this. So I'm trying to be a Superman, and I'm trying to, now I got other kids that I'm trying to let them see I'm okay. We're going to pull together, everybody. And it just seemed like that spiral went on for years. That spiral it never healed. It took a different shape. That's why I say, anybody ever going through a grief like that, don't do anything right away. Don't make notes. You could be sorry for those decisions when you got things like that going on. But I never recovered. I never recovered. I look back. See, the good part about it is, in both of those deaths, the time I spent with them are the best times of my life. That I don't reflect on it with sorrow. I reflect on them with beauty. I was lucky. I was lucky to have that time. I was very lucky to have that time. But then that does, again, and I can take that for a long time. Then the self-pity comes in, and then so it just goes, you're just creating damage all the way along. More damage to a damaged situation. But Like I said,
I appreciate what you said, that um, that you what the positive that came out of that was the happy memories that you had experienced with your wives, and I think that's very important. Have you found where that has been um, stabilizing, to be able to focus on that aspect? Because it would seem to me that, and I don't even, I, I'm just amazed that, I mean, when I hear this you recounting this, I'm just like overwhelmed, just by what you've had to go through, and to be able to even talk about it, is just uh,
see,
amazing.
Gunter, and because even when my second wife passed, she died sick. I watched her die. I watched her. She came home to die. I watched her take her last breath. One was instant. One was not instant. It was very up close and personal, and in either case, like what Al says, his that was his best job, to take care of Nancy. I know exactly what he's talking about. I took my wife home the same way to help her go. We knew she was going. We're gonna make the last breaths, the quality of life. That's an experience right there. That is that's a that's a tremendous experience right there. Uh, to be able to do that with somebody. Uh, and I don't look back at it as sorrow. Like Al says, that was the best job he ever had. That was the best job I ever had. As hard as that might seem to people, um, you know, you see them at their worst, and you. I would have never thought I could do something like that. But and I look back at it, it was grace. It it was grace. I learned a lot from it. It
Can
gives
you
me good
share?
memories.
Can you share some of the things that you learned from that? Because I think that's very important. If you don't
Well,
mind, I don't want to get too
sure.
personal.
The things that gain from it, at that point they are all personal, because it's you and her. It's all personal, and it's a it's I don't know if I have words for it. It's just it's a personal experience between two people that I don't know if anybody could understand, unless they were that
In that
they
situation.
were to see their last breath, to to wake up today could be the day, tomorrow could be the day, and you're going to. It's and like Al's, my story with reflects a lot with Al. She was the strong one. She kept me strong. She's the reason why I was able to do that. Just by the look on her face, just by the her demeanor, just how things was, she kept me strong, and I fed off of that, and I wanted to keep her strong, and it, I don't, Gunther. That's hard to to share an experience like that. Uh,
I understand. I
and
understand
and
totally.
put it into words.
To me, it seems, And again, I have not been in your shoes, have not been in Al's shoes, and so I'm not one to speak at all. But it seems to me that um, it really encapsulates the essence of true biblical love between Christ and his church, between a man, a husband, and his wife. Okay, in the most vulnerable kind of situation imaginable, facing death, and yet they're doing it together and they're helping each other in that process. And of course, for the one left behind, it's even more difficult than the one going. And so that part to me is, again, very, very, very touching. And I really appreciate you talking about this, very candidly. And I'm sure that there are those that might be listening that could really benefit from your perspective, because they might find themselves in that same situation. And so I always think about that passage in 2 Corinthians 1, 3 and 4, where it talks about the comfort that we get from God. We are able to take that same comfort and share that with others. And I think that's very, very important, because I don't think anything that God enables us or allows us to go through is ever wasted. It has a purpose for ourselves, but also for who knows how many other people that might benefit from what we have gone through. Because unless, as you correctly said, unless you've gone through that experience, you can't know what it's like. Only those that have gone through it. And I guess that's really what we're talking about today, is going through suffering, but realizing that there is a purpose for it, and there is a benefit as we go through that suffering. It doesn't mean we're not going to go through it, but it just means that as we go through it, there's something there that God is working not only in our lives, but in the other person's life as well. And you realize that it's a very special moment, even though we might be talking months or years, but that period of time is something that is very personal, very individual, and yet by exploring that, I really believe that it benefits others, it helps others in a way that we might not be able to perceive. And so I really thank you for sharing all of that. It means a lot. And I'm wondering also if, I think a big part of healing is the ability to forgive ourselves, especially if we know that God has forgiven us. And a lot of times we have more problems, or I should say more difficulty in forgiving ourselves than in forgiving others. And I think that the healing has to start, especially if we know that the Lord has forgiven us. Then we can not only forgive others, but we can forgive ourselves. And I think you hit upon something important when you said that when others look at you, you can't change what has happened in the past. All you can do is say, that was then, and you can be honest about it. I'm not proud of what happened. I'm ashamed of what happened, but it happened. I can't change that. Okay, but nonetheless, even if others don't forgive you, the important thing is knowing that the Lord forgives you, number one, if one is a child of God, and number two, you can forgive yourself, because that is a very important step in the healing process.
You know, Gunther, that's a tough one, because I even raised my kids this way. I want to see remorse. I don't want to hear an apology. I'll know in your eyes. I can look in your face. I want you to wear it. And I made myself wear it. Okay? That's what I thought. And boy, undoing that, to reprogram yourself from that, that's tough. That's really tough. Because there's time. I even now I'm like, what do you mean forgive yourself? There's justice to what you that you deserve what you've done. There's there's grace, but there's also just. And I have a hard time forgiving myself, and it's like I hang on to it. I'm afraid to let go. That's another part of the surrender that he's forcing me to do right now. It's another part. I had no idea how deep surrender was. And it's not just surrender your anger. It's just the easy things. Surrender is to empty yourself. That's almost impossible. Well, it actually is impossible unless he's doing it. It's impossible. But because of pride, I had no idea that was a bad thing. I thought it was a good thing. I thought it was, good to have remorse, and wear it on my sleeve. I always wore my heart on my sleeve. But like I said, these are the first steps. These are the first times I've been awakened to this. This for sure. It just had to take being alone, I guess.
Well, it's also, everybody's journey is different and customizable, and we're all at different points in the journey. Not one point is better or less than the other point. They're just different. And in some cases, they dovetail. Your experience, for example, with Al's, dovetails, but yet what God is doing in each of our lives is different. And I think it shows how loving and gracious God is in terms of customizing us. It's different for each person. It's like a custom job for each person. And to me, that's always just been astounding but God's the potter, we're the clay. He's got a purpose. If he doesn't like that particular handle on the pot, he can remove it, put on another handle as he sees fit. But I appreciate what you said about the self-forgiveness being a difficult part of the surrender. And I'm sure that there are other parts that are difficult too. But that, I think, is obviously something to pray about. And like you said, it's not like we can do it on our own. We can't do anything on our own. By God's mercy, though, he can work these things in our lives as you said, we become aware of them, and then we can pray about those things, and then we can possibly make steps to implement certain things or certain attitudes that would help us to do that. So yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you might want to add?
No, that That was a whole lot for me to do, Gunther. That was a whole lot for me to do. But I did it.
Yeah.
I mean, saying it, just
Sure. Well,
just putting it out there. But
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
A non-judgmental situation is the place to do it. It makes it easier. And
Yeah.
I thank
I'm
BMI
sure.
for this.
I'm sure. Well, that's what we want to be. We want to be that space where people can feel secure in being vulnerable, because really all of us are in one way or the other, and that's important to have that outlet so that people can feel comfortable and at ease, even though what you shared must for you have been, as you said, difficult to do. Even to state it is difficult, and yet you did, by God's grace. And so we are deeply appreciative of that, and that means a lot to me personally, but also to everybody that is listening as well. We have a comment from Sunny Sandy. It's hard not having family or friends, but I pray for Al, Mark, and Roger, and that gives me the peace that I need to get through these times. And I appreciate you saying that, Sunny Sandy, because we, as I said, we know that God uses other people in our lives to bless us, and nothing that God allows goes to waste. Just like nothing in Scripture ever goes to waste. It's very economical, and that is something about the nature of God which I personally have been learning about over the last few years. God's economy in how He uses the elements in the Bible and the experiences in our life for the benefit of others. Whatever God does, it's never wasted at all, but it has a divine purpose. It has a divine impact on who knows how many people. And so that's why I really appreciate you sharing what you did today, Mark, and Sunny Sandy for your comment, which really reinforces what Mark said. And I thank you for that. And again, anybody who wants to comment on text, feel free to do so. We want to hear your voice as well. Any thoughts at all, Al?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I got to say to Mark, you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. You have us, you have God. You're not alone. And to go back quickly to the beginning where Gunther had mentioned his son and the alphabet, and if that had not happened, maybe you would not have had this great interest in the Hebrew language, or maybe you would have taken a different path with it. But then you think about the thief on the cross. If he had been crucified Thursday instead of Friday, he would have never met the Savior. See, so everything has a reason. Everything has a purpose. It's Nancy and I volunteered for almost 25 years at our nursing home, week after week, every week after week, for years and years and years. And I cannot begin to tell you the losses you sustain when you work in a nursing home. every 2, 3, 4 weeks, you go there and Dorothy died, or Fran died, or Jane died. You know, every month you go in and, oh man, she died, really, you know, and it's just, you know, you grieve constantly. And I don't know, I kind of look at that as maybe, you know, God was preparing me for something. Maybe now my job actually begins, because now that I've started to, I don't know if heal is the right word, maybe cope or adjust, you know, because losing Nancy was, that was everything. You know, when we first got married, I went from an apartment in Brooklyn with my mother to an apartment in Brooklyn with my wife. I've never, ever been alone in my life. Never. You know what I mean? I've always had either my mother or my wife. I've never lived alone, ever. And, you know, that to me is a huge adjustment. You know, I wake up sometimes at 5:30 in the morning and I think I'm hearing Nancy, I got to go to the bathroom. And I mean, I know it's stupid, but that's how I feel. You know, I wake up and I think, I got to get her up. I got to, no, you don't, stupid. She's in the cemetery. And, you know, for months and months and months, even before she really, you know, before I came, like Mark said, before you realize that, you know, they're leaving. And, you know, you better start preparing yourself for that loss. And I would say to her, I'll wait for you. You know, corny. I would say to her, I'll wait for you by the gate and I won't go in till you get there. And she would look at me like, you know, I appreciate that, but I don't think you're going before me, kind of thing. And, but you know, if you look at Ecclesiastes, I was reading it the other day, chapter 1, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, and you know, yeah, verses 22 through 24. For what hath a man in all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, and his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. And I think about that and I say, you know, it's very true. No matter how much, think about it, no matter how much God blessed Jacob, what was his answer to Pharaoh? Few and evil have been the days of my life. And that's just, you know, this is life. I mean, but what is the end result? Where do we want to get to through all this misery and grief and sorrow? What's the end result? To be with Christ. And I think that's what makes coping with things a little better. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because that is a key point, because we realize that at each step there's something that God is doing. He's using us, as you said, your purpose, you know, begins now. the work begins now. And I think that that's huge in terms of how you perceive going forward with that kind of attitude, that mission mindedness, so to speak, wanting to continue the legacy that you and Nancy had together and doing it on your own to continue that. And I think that's really powerful. And I'm sure it speaks volumes to those that are there in the nursing home that you would be willing to do that. And I realize that some people there, because of their dementia or Alzheimer's, might not realize, as you stated, that Nancy's no longer there. She's no longer alive. But and you have to remind them of that. But the
But with
fact that
having that stroke and going over to this place in Pennsylvania, I wouldn't be there. Now starting since this past Wednesday, I started there now every other week. So every other Wednesday, I will be in Pennsylvania, performing for the senior citizens there. So it opened up a whole new door. Who knows what God will do?
That's right. And how far away is that from you in PA?
About 40 minutes.
Okay.
It's not far.
This was used to shut me up right away when I got. Have you guys ever been to a trauma hospital, to an actual I think every kinder or grammar school, they should have field trips. You really want to see how small your problem is? Go to a trauma center. I had to stay at a Ronald McDonald house. I had no idea what I was walking into, you guys. No idea. I thought I was just going to the hospital to see what was going on. I got put in a Ronald McDonald house. They have a Fisher house. They have all kinds of things where these families are there. They're all in traumas. They're all in. My problem became this small to me when I seen these little kids in these Ronald McDonald, these burn victims, these cancer kids. They're these ICU units at trauma. They got young kids in there, you guys, with nobody, just the nurses there to comfort them. The parents would come in, then they would leave. 20 minutes. They're there with nobody. It'll break your heart. That's something that's never left me, is the sight of that trauma, to see it really makes you take a second look at how things really go on for other people too, other families. It's horrific.
Yeah, Gunther, I don't know if you remember, but Westchester Medical is a trauma hospital. Well, Nancy was. I don't know if you remember the story. The man behind my wife, I don't know if I told you, if you remember, I was telling you, but he had tubes in his lungs, tubes in his face. And I felt so bad for that poor guy, because 3 days Nancy was there and I was there maybe 7, 8, 9 hours a day. And I never saw anybody come to see that poor guy. And, every night I pray. And when I wake up during the night, I pray. And the first thing I do is I pray for those nurses in ICU, because you know how many people they got to see die every single day. And there's not a darn thing they can do about it. Nothing. There's only so much human intervention God will allow. And then you die. This is why I say, I sat in those hospitals and I can't believe. And when I passed the chapel, I would sit for a minute. Nobody was ever in there. How do you go through life? How do you face death without Christ? How do you, I can't, I don't know. I can't even wrap my fingers around, my mind around it. Oh, no, yeah, I know that trauma hospital, those poor little kids with, nope, yep, I've seen them.
Even
not
even outside the hospital, one night, I'm wallowing in my misery up there. My daughter came, and she was at the time 24, somewhere at that age, and she came to me crying, "Dad, can you give up your bed at the Ronald McDonald House? There's a family sleeping in their car in the parking garage, and they're waiting for Ronald. And you got to be on a waiting list to get into these things. So they're not, even though that's going on in the hospital, that stuff outside, that there are real traumas, real families suffer, man. This world, there's pain. There is pain. So I did give up the Ronald McDonald House and let them stay, of course,
It was nice. That was nice. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, what are you going to do? I mean,
I know.
Of course.
Of course.
I mean, you got families sleeping anyways. Yeah.
But you're right. When we see what other people have to go through, it's horrific, because there's always somebody that is going through something far worse than what we're going through. And even that person who's going through that, there's someone else that's in far worse shape than that person. Like, it never stops. And yet we realize that God somehow gives the strength to go through whatever it is that we have to go through, and he sees us through it, and a lot of times we just don't know. We feel like we don't have any strength or any ability to do anything, and yet God enables us after the fact to look back and say, yes, by your strength, by your grace, I was able to survive this and come through on the other end. And again, I think that's important, because
that's one of the takeaways, Gunther, that because I can say that if I would have told myself, if that were to ever happen, I don't know what I would do. I probably couldn't make it. And I'm telling you, God does make you through that. He does. He is there, because there's no way you can you can't wrap your mind around that enough to think. And if I would have thought before, there's no way, I couldn't do it. And well, it's true. You can't do it, because He does it. He does it. It's all Him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really thank you both for sharing what's on your hearts. And I know that for those that are listening, I'm sure it means a lot. And for someone that is going through something similar, could it be that God might use what you have said to give comfort, hope, and encouragement to them? As Al said, we're not alone. We are our brother's keeper. And that's very important to remember that. And of course, God is right there, if we are His child, with us, helping us along the way. And again, I thank you both, and I thank Sonny Sandy, and for everybody that is listening. We appreciate your participation today, and we will do this again, Lord willing, next Friday evening. And hope you have a great rest of your week, and may the Lord richly bless you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.